Hello, I'm Richard Watts. In this edition of In Conversation, I'm talking to the Australian author John Michell about his book Dublin Zoo, which does have a local flavour to Barton in it. How did Dublin Zoo come about? What's the story behind it?
Dublin Zoo came about because I decided to write a book about the French resistance during World War II. And it grew organically from there, from one single story into three stories wrapped into the one book. And I gave it the title Dublin Zoo, not because the book has got anything to do with the zoo in Dublin, but because there was an expression handed down by the hero's father to the hero, to his son, which is a term for a very bad situation, a dire situation.
Right.
And so this guy has used, the book starts with the words a Dublin Zoo and ends with the words a Dublin Zoo deliberately. If anyone's ever picked that up, I don't know. But as I say, it's got precious little to do with the zoo in Dublin, except when I went to the zoo in Dublin many years ago on a winter's day, I often thought to myself, it was that sort of moody sort of day where I thought it'd be a good expression for a problematic situation, I suppose, is where it came from. I mean, to be perfectly blunt with you, I could have called it anything in the world because there is no hardwired connection to Dublin Zoo, but it was just that I'd carried around in my head for years this idea that the Dublin Zoo could be used as a term to create something a bit negative, a bit moody, a bit problematic, and so I applied it to the book.
And how does it, with it being French resistance, how do they come over to England, and in particular, sort of like places sort of close to us in Barton? How does sort of like Hull and Scunthorpe get involved in the book?
Well, it works the other way around. I started to write about the French resistance, and then I figured that I needed to expand it to put in the other elements that make a book, the intrigue, the mystery, and the romance, and all the rest of it. So I decided I'd start the book with the hero's father, and who married the hero's mother, a French woman, in World War I. And he was from Newcastle. Now, having been through the Midlands of England myself during the heart of winter many moons ago, I wanted the hero's father to fetch up in a location that was hard work. And so I settled on Scunthorpe. And so the first third of the book is about the father's rise to riches in Scunthorpe and then his decline. And with that, the growth of the hero from a child into a man. And when the point comes he has to leave Scunthorpe, as I say, that's about a third of the book, that the father's story, if you like. When he has to leave Scunthorpe, he goes to London, and then the second stage of the book takes place in London. And the third stage of the book is when he's parachuted into France to pick up with the French resistance.
Right.
So it's as I say, it's three stories. They're seamless. I don't have them in parts 1, 2, and 3. They're seamlessly linked together. And they flow into each other. But I never plot my books out. I always just, I knew I wanted to write something about the French resistance, so I started. And then it just sort of grows, I mean, I literally sit in front of this computer we're talking on now, and I just type, and it takes me in all sorts of various places. So.
Right. And how long did it take to write?
Yeah, good question. I would say close to 18 months.
Right.
Yeah. The editing's the hard bit. It's you can get the story there, and then you've got to get the consistency of the plot and go back and work through the making it flow and making sure you're not contradicting yourself here and then doing something different up there. But I'm pretty happy with it. Look, I wouldn't for a second try to tell you that it couldn't stand some improvement. I think it probably could, but by and large, I'm pretty happy with it, and it's out there now. So this is why I'm in touch with you. I went to the States to try and give it a push along, and unfortunately, the virus chased me back.
Right. Yeah.
So I've been trying to. It's an English book. I think it's got better distribution in the States than in England, but it's an English book, and I'm trying to generate interest in UK. And as I say, the first part of the book, the first third, is set in North Lincolnshire and Scunthorpe predominantly, but also Highland, Grimsby, and places like that get a mention. And unfortunately, Barton doesn't. But it's I'm just trying to generate some interest in the UK for the book. Now, I don't know how successful I'll be, and I don't know how people will receive it. But as I said, I'm quite happy with it. I pick it up periodically and have a look at it. Having said that, the author is the last person on earth who should ever assess their work. So.
And how long did it take from sort of having the initial idea that you were going to write this book to actually sitting down and writing it? Was that a long period of research before, or how did that come about?
No, it took about another 18 months. And the reason for that is that I sat down to write a first novel based on my work, or drawing inspiration from my work, I should say, as a diplomat.
Right.
And I wrote a draft, which took me about 18 months. And it wasn't quite what I wanted. And it was then I decided, well, okay, I'll put that down and I'll write this book about the French resistance.
Mm.
And so then I picked up. So from when I first started writing, it was in February 2017, I decided that I'd become a full-time writer. I was working in the law. I'd been a diplomat for 33 years before that. And I just decided that was it. And I was actually in the States at the time then, in February 2017. And so I just decided, right, I'm going to become a writer. So I set about writing this first novel, which got to manuscript completion, put it down, then wrote Dublin Zoo. And now I'm back where I've revisited the manuscript for the first one, and it's coming out soon, hopefully. I hope in a month or so.
What's this one called? The one that's coming out?
Called The Far Grass.
Right. And what's that about? It's
about a guy who's a British spy, an MI6 spy. But the Cold War spy fiction genre is so mined that it's very difficult to write something, and you're competing with the masters ultimately, and the Le Carre's this world and stuff. So I wanted to write something unique in that genre, which is quite a challenge. But what I've come up with is a person who's an accidental recruit into MI6 for political reasons. He gets recruited into MI6 for political reasons in the early 70s. And then it's about his career, and he starts off, and he has a lot of dysfunction about him, a lot of relationship dysfunction. He struggles with class prejudice in MI6, and he finally progresses to a point where he meets someone whom he loves for the first time, and she's killed in retaliation for his spying exploits, and from that, he goes into a process to try and find who in the Soviet system gave the order to kill her, and he becomes very cynical, very ruthless, and he ends up fighting his own side, the Americans, and as well as the Soviets. And he gets to a point where he finds out who's done it. Well, it sort of reaches its climax in Moldova. Which is not explaining it very well, but it's really not a Cold War spy fiction novel. It's a novel about an accidental British spy during the Cold War, if you understand the distinction. I'm still going through it. In fact, I was at it today for hours and hours, and I changed one paragraph that I thought was okay, that I changed. So it's still got a bit of work.
When do you hope that might be published?
It's now, mid-August? I'd say conservatively October. I think. It really depends on how much time I can put into it and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'd say October.
And just going back to Dublin Zoo, whereabouts can people buy it from in the UK?
Okay, well, there's Waterstones, the Book Depository, Aid Books, and there's also, it's on amazon.co.uk as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's there. As I said, the distribution in the US, I don't know, I'm dealing through this other company, and the distribution in the US seems to be far wider. It's in virtually every state, yet it's relatively, comparatively anyway, limited in the UK. But there are a number of major platforms, as I say. Yeah, no, look, I think it's a book. Look, it's written in British English for a start. And I think that, you know, just the language I use and expressions I use, I orientate it more towards England. Now, you might ask why I've written a book, you know, about an English person rather than an Australian, as I am. But the truth is, it'd just be too unrealistic to write this book about an Australian person, because they just didn't have the interaction with the French resistance. There was some, but it was fairly limited, and there was just not the interaction with the French resistance that the British had. So it sort of made sense to write it as a British person.
Yeah.
And I might add, the Far Grass coming out, well, I did say is a British person too, but that was, if I was perfectly honest, it was to put some distance between me and my past work. I'm careful not to stumble into any sort of legal landmines.
Yes. It's amazing how many people seem to start writing as sort of like a second career. I think there's 3 other people that I've interviewed who've done something similar.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it, and look, it's hard work. And was it Ricky Nelson that wrote the song "You Can't Please Everyone, So You've Got to Please Yourself"? I think.
Yes.
It's incredibly difficult to write a book that has universal appeal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you for nothing, my favourite book of all time is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, which did win a Booker Prize. But even then, you know, I say that to people, and people say, "Really? I didn't think much of that." So, you know, it's just impossible.
Yeah.
You just got to get people who are interested in the subject matter. It's very complicated to explain in simple words, but in this book I draw a lot on the heavy water they had in Norway during the war, which is part of the atomic bomb process. That gets tied up in the book, and Vichy France, Field Marshal Pétain, that sort of thing, that all gets tied up, as does Britain's return to the gold standard in 1925, and then the Great Depression in 1929. They're all actual historical events that I exploit, I suppose you'd say, that I weave into the plot. And if you're interested in those subjects, then I think that you will get a lot from the book. But if you're not interested in the subjects, I'll save you time.
So just to recap, the book is Dublin Zoo. It's certainly available on the Amazon platform, so you'll be able to pick it up there. And thanks very much for talking to me. It's been very interesting, and I wish you all the success with the book. Thanks a lot.
See you later on.
Cheers. Bye.
Okay. Ciao. Bye.